Support for Donnybrook is provided in part by Design Air Heating and Cooling.
Seems fair to me. Well, if you don't know what fair is, you can't make it.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.
Thank you so much for joining us. Wow, what a week we have to talk about. And we're going to get to it in just a moment. But first, let's meet the panelists. She's the media veteran herself, Wendy Wiese, along with Mr. Bill McClellan from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, Sarah Fenske from St. Louis Magazine and the 314 podcast. And we welcome last week's great provocateur, Alvin Reid from the St. Louis American. Well, that was Thursday, last week's show. And then on Friday, Sarah, a horrific tornado ripped its way through much of Richmond Heights and Clayton and the Central West End, North St. Louis. Tragically, 5 people died. However, the New York Times reports today, like many other news outlets, including yours, that the city of St. Louis did not sound its alarms before the tornado, even though it had been notified by the National Weather Service at 2:35 last Friday afternoon. What's the latest on this?
Well, it's safe to say that mistakes were made. The commissioner in charge of the city emergency management agency has been put on leave. Mayor Kara Spencer did that, saying that the more that she probes what's going on there, she said it's like an onion. There are just layers and layers of dysfunction in this siren system. And this apparently dates back many, many years, even predating former Mayor Tashara Jones. But what happened here apparently is that all the people at the City Emergency Management Agency were all at a workshop where they were off-site, not connected to the physical button. There's a button that you have to like push in real life, not just on a digital platform. They were all at this training, and Sarah Russell, the commissioner, called the fire department and said, "You got this button, right?" And it was somewhat of an unclear instruction. And the fire department said like, yes, but didn't really understand that she meant for them to push it. And so now the latest thinking is that they didn't push it. And then we found out days later that even if they had pushed it, the fire department's version of this particular button didn't even work.
Okay.
So it's kind of error after error.
And you guys were discussing last week how the doors at Metrolink apparently don't operate. And Bill, you pointed out that the locks on the jail don't work. What the heck is going on? I mean, how many more of these are we going to have in our area?
I mean, because of, obviously this is fresh, I think those things kind of pale in comparison,
True.
Especially for where we live. And especially since, you know, just because hey, we might have terrible weather tomorrow, that doesn't mean we're going to have terrible weather tomorrow. But if I'm in charge of the tornado siren and there's a chance of severe weather, I'm not leaving my job with everybody else who does the job and be any place. I'd also be interested, what was this training and where were you at? I really am interested.
Well, we know where they were. They were in downtown St. Louis. They were not traveling. It wasn't
were they in a
glamorous
building?
chunk
Were they
day.
in a room with windows? I mean, I hate to
Yeah.
say something that basic, but we've been here at Channel 9 in the middle of a severe, weather outbreak, and we didn't have windows.
And I will say, I was flying back to St. Louis. I happened to be in Nevada that morning, woke up, looked at the Channel 5 website, and it said a chance of tornadoes between 1 and 7 p.m. So I was concerned because I'd be flying back in the middle of that. But I wasn't the head of the City Emergency Management Agency. You would think that person would have been saying, okay, I don't know what the workshop's about, but I'm going to stay in my office next to the button for 6 hours.
Yeah, it does seem awfully casual. And then that you'd make a phone call to the fire department. You guys got this? Yep.
Well, and you and your staff addressed this belief that we have I've had it all my life, even though we have a history of some pretty devastating storms in the city of St. Louis, that, it never really happens in the city. They never touch down in the city.
Right, we just turn on the arch is the
there's
joke.
some sort of geological force field around the city.
Did anybody know that somebody had to physically push a button?
No.
I did not.
And
maybe it's not like that other places. Maybe there's some.
I mean, the system is clearly not a state-of-the-art system. This idea of having loud sirens outside in an era when everyone has smartphones, it does seem a little bit obsolete.
phone
but on
went
the
off.
other hand,
Okay.
yeah, phones went off.
And
but
where I
older-
was at, everybody's phone went off.
But older people in North City don't
true.
necessarily
I
have
get it.
smartphones.
Now, why was Sarah Russell put on leave with pay?
Well, because you can't just out and out fire people and
can't?
stuff.
The mayor doesn't even have the ability to fire this person, is my understanding. As everything with the city, it's all baked into the charter. There are layers. And she took every action she could to say, we're going to have an external investigation.
And it's still being investigated. I mean,
Right.
the mayor's not saying that she knows exactly who was at fault, or so I think that makes sense.
Okay, but now Michael Butler, the recorder of deeds, Bill, is lambasting the mayor on Facebook and saying that it's all her fault. Meanwhile, we'll go to a clip here. Some aldermen came to the mayor's defense after Mr. Butler made those excoriating allegations.
There is nothing that I have asked of this mayor that she has not done. She has gone above and beyond what is required of her. She's been in office 1 month.
I can't deal with all of the negativity when there are people out here who are hurting. This needs to stop.
So the mayor has been going house to house, going to neighborhoods. She's been actually walking in the houses, seeing what people are dealing with.
I'll say this, we don't always agree down at the Board of Aldermen, but in this moment right now, we understand we have to be unified.
McClellan, was Michael Butler out of line?
Well, no, I think he's just positioning himself as the shadow mayor. I remember 4 years ago when then Mayor Lyda Crewson had not a serious moment like this, but an awkward moment with a shovel-ready thing, a project at the Arch, and it was all white people. Lacey Clay was invited but didn't show up, and Lyda Crewson just said, this shows what we can do when we all work together. And it was a tone-deaf statement, and she apologized for it. And Tashara Jones said, we're sick of apologies. Apologies don't do enough. We need something better than this. And I remember writing a column saying that she was the shadow mayor. And I think Michael Butler is just positioning himself in that way. I mean, I don't think that anybody can realistically blame Kara Spencer for inheriting an old system, but Michael Butler is just letting her know.
And a city emergency management agency head who was somebody else's appointee. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think Michael Butler is also saying, we just came off a period where everything was the mayor's fault. Okay,
right.
It didn't matter and then the call was always out for why didn't she just fire the woman who runs the jail, or why didn't she just fire so-and-so? He said, because she can't just fire these people. That's the way the city charter is. She couldn't just fire them. So there was kind of no relief. Now, it was campaign season, I will say that. Now, one thing, if you're elected president, if you're elected senator, if you're elected mayor of a city, town, municipality, I don't want to hear you've been on the job 1 month. When you've been on the job 1 hour, if all hell breaks loose, you're in charge. So I don't want to hear you just been on. I'm not saying this is all her fault. I'm just saying that, but she just been on the job a month. Well,
I mean, he was saying it was all her fault. He was saying this siren thing, and I do think it was very tone deaf. I think this is something that no mayor could have seen coming. I questioned all the mayoral candidates leading up to this. Nobody was talking about the emergency management agency at that point. Michael Butler was not talking about it.
Of course,
And so to try to pin this on her, I get that politically it's smooth. I like Mike, but I thought this was not the right
But you want to know
for
something?
that.
I think Alvin makes a point in that whether it's criticism from the editorial page of your paper or your magazine or the Post-Dispatch or criticism from Donnybrook, that's important to keep elected officials on their toes.
Right.
And I think that actually plays a role. At the same time, I will say I give this mayor some plaudits because she's not sending Connor Kerrigan out there. She's not sending Doug Moore. She's been in front of the cameras numerous times since last Friday, including on this matter.
Right. And walking into people's homes.
Yeah, no, the editorial page, the editorial today says hey, we can do nothing but commend the effort of the mayor at this time. But a lot is going to happen.
Sure.
There
will be a time.
Yes, a lot is going to happen, and a lot is going to happen over the summer here. And we don't even have to go into the whole where's FEMA and what is going on with that. But we're kind of like left in this like kind of what's going to happen next.
Right.
And maybe
There's a
people
whole lot.
and
overall,
these older people, Michael Butler. I'm not saying the people are choosing sides already for a race that's 4 years away, but they are.
Well,
They absolutely are.
Another thing, watching that clip is just astounding, is for those of us who remember Sharon Tyus. In her original incarnation, to see Sharon Tyus being completely reasonable and thoughtful about stuff, it's wow. I mean
she used to dish it.
She still dishes it.
God.
Sharon was dishing it last week, and she may have even been dishing it at the Board of Aldermen this week. But I think she thought that that particular criticism was out of line. And I think what made it wrong is he didn't point out any specific thing that she had done. She inherited this problem, and I think she did a good job of being very transparent.
And the mayor, the former mayor, did get a very bad deal, I thought, on the snow. Because I remember saying on the show, snow, this is an act of nature, an act of God. And there were people who blamed Tashara Jones for poor snow removal when we had never had a snow removal policy.
To be clear, though, in 2025, there has to be a better apparatus for everybody in every region, not only of St. Louis, but of the nation, because we have become so complacent. There is some sort of situation out in the county, north, south, east, west, what have you, that adjacent counties. So now, unless you do have your phone and you're getting these alerts, you genuinely don't know, because I can hear counties a couple of counties away when their sirens are going off. It is not a fail-safe, foolproof system.
Alvin, Reid, overall, I mean, the experience I had, like I live in Clayton, and I saw power companies from all over, from Forestell and all over Missouri responding to the power. And then when it came to people trimming trees and picking up the limbs, they were from Baldwin and all over the state. They had come together. And then when it came to police officers, Eureka, Richmond Heights, WashU, in addition to Clayton, they had people from Olivet and Creve Coeur. I guess Chief Mark Smith had activated Code 1000, which brings in mutual aid throughout Clayton. And then in the city of St. Louis, this morning, along with Mike McClellan from the Urban League outside his beleaguered headquarters on Kings Highway, you got the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints from Kearney, Nebraska, and then across the street is Keeley, and then down the street is McCarthy and Alberici and Clayco. I've never seen the region pulled together like this.
Well, I think that, obviously this just does not happen. And when
we've had floods,
but it's true.
We've had tornadoes.
But when you see it, okay, Saturday morning I went to the Saturday morning press conference, and that was the first time I drove through the North City neighborhoods. And when you see it, it calls you to action. I mean, this is not one that those trees, those power lines, all that. It was more than a city could handle, and it's going to be more than the city can handle. So I applaud everybody. But the first people to start helping each other were neighbors helping neighbors.
Yeah.
And there was no time for my house made it, yours didn't, all that. There were just people who were just helping people. And it was beautiful to see, but just it's just a horrific scene. And the last thing people throughout the city need, where there's damage, are a bunch of people coming and like gawking. But if you see it, you'll understand.
I say gawk before 7 a.m. when traffic is not busy.
Yes, yeah.
And because when you drive through North St. Louis, you will be convinced you got to pull out your wallet and make a contribution.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Yes.
Yeah, it's been great to see just so much mobilization so quickly, so well organized. I've had so many reporters out there, so many friends out there volunteering, and they have all come away impressed at just the volume of people trying to help and how well organized the people leading these charges are. They've been able to do a lot. There's still so much to do.
Right, well, and it would help, I'm sorry, but Saturday morning, I've been talking to the governor. I've talked to the president's office, and this and that, and they're going to move, and okay, all right, that was Saturday, and ain't nobody moved on Sunday and Monday, and the Hawley's questioning the FEMA director, and she said, like, now you blah, 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 do that, and the FEMA director said, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to do. You know what she said? Yes, okay, like, yes, right. And they say, Hawley gets FEMA director to pledge St. Louis help, and she said, yes. Okay. Now, supposedly they were here yesterday. Have you?
They are here assessing.
Okay.
We're waiting for the assessment.
It's so soon. Let me put it this way.
All right.
Asheville got hit by a hurricane September 25th. HUD just agreed to give the money 5 days ago. So it's a long road. And since it is so long, Wendy, do you think that Rams money that we won in that litigation with Stan Kroenke and the NFL, $300 million now in the city of St. Louis, should go exclusively to North St. Louis and the Central West End where there was damage?
I think in a perfect world, sure, it would. But in a city that really needed a reset and was kind of looking forward to a new day, and things seem to be, we're starting over, everybody's sort of on the same page for now. Politically, I think that is going to end up being a minefield if you try to allocate. I understand what you're saying.
Who could deny it?
Because you can't. They're not going to go door to door and give people money, okay? So who's going to get the money? Now, the second, you said Alberici's going to get some, and a lot of this is going to go overtime to the people that came to St. Louis and helped out. And people be saying well, wait a minute, hold it. All this money is going to all these different entities. Meanwhile, my house ain't got no roof. Right. So yes,
or a wall. Right?
A wall. This will be. I don't think you could just say we're going to use the Rams money, because you have to first declare what are you going to use the Rams money on.
It'll be like the last time around. Everybody can kind of agree, we want to do X and Y, and then it turned out the devil is in the details, and there are a million different ways to skin the cat.
And I'm not picking on Alberici, by the way. I just know that they were one of the first to become involved. I'm not picking on them. I'm just, that name was just
Well, that's going to be the real challenge for the new mayor, is trying to, get the community to stick with this so this doesn't turn out to be like Thanksgiving where people go down to the homeless shelter and feed the homeless and then forget about them for the next year. I think that the mood right now is one of people do want to help, and I think that it can be marshaled.
No, I agree. I'm with you, Wendy.
That was a
we got to find a whole lot of other money, I think, before we delve into that money.
A lot of people are going to be in transitional housing. What do you think about your alma mater, Fontbonne University, and those dormitories there? Walking distance of Schnucks, Esquire Theater, Clayton has a nice pool. Why not? Well, it's empty. The campus is not using those dorms anymore.
We have a lot of empty buildings in St. Louis.
Well, that's true. Hotels downtown.
Quite a few empty buildings in St. Louis, and I think that is a terrific idea. And I do think right now, as we saw in that clip, there is such a sense of unity and purpose that if it's never happened before, I could see something like that happening right now. And I think that's exactly what the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet would want to see. They're not land developers.
But I was just say, everybody wants to help until. Well, do we have to help them here?
Right.
Yeah.
Isn't there any place else?
I think it'd be great. They're right down the street from the Brown School of Social Work at Washington University. It'd be a perfect marriage to me. Hey, Wendy, I want to ask you about the population loss in the city of St. Louis. From 2020 to 2024, St. Louis City lost more people than any other large city in the United States, and only 5 cities with populations greater than 20,000 lost more as a percentage than St. Louis City. So the question for you is, we've been seeing this going on. Is there any way to reverse this population decline?
I believe that it absolutely will be reversed, and I have nothing in terms of statistics to base that on. I'm just talking about anecdotal evidence and growing up in this state and growing up in this city, and where Kansas City used to be Alvin, back me up here.
That's true.
The butt of every joke, and now they have past us right down the raceway, and everything in life is cyclical. These situations where you have, aging aging populations, not having as many children, these things don't happen overnight. And so everything is going to shake out. As I said, I don't know if it's going to happen in our lifetime, but we absolutely will bounce back.
I like to believe that, and I hope that it will be sooner rather than later. I think there's some interesting population trends happening in the city where families have just been moving out, and so you have something that used to be a duplex is now just housing maybe a couple that's never going to have any kids. That's a huge driver of this. Unfortunately, this tornado is only going to exacerbate that population loss. I mean, you're going to see a lot of these families won't be able to return.
And when you talk about kids, I mean, a lot of it comes down to schools.
Right.
It's hard to attract young families if you don't have good schools, and the schools need money, and now the tornado is going to be taking this money. But I wish I had a solution.
Thousands of people will leave the north side now, if not tens of thousands. Yeah. Because if your house is destroyed, they're not going to rebuild a house where your house sat. How long would that take anyway? You're going to have to live someplace else. And so thousands of people are going to leave. I mean, and then, so now you got to recoup those you're about to lose now on top of the fact that we're losing people anyway. It's not a no-win situation, but at the same time, this is terrible for the population problem.
The population was dispersed after Katrina. Do we know how many of those folks were able to return to New Orleans? And all of the,
it was not a huge percentage.
It's not a huge percentage. But now one thing that happens, and it would take is what was that, 2005?
2005.
People have now been born and had kids, so you get a natural population come back because, people have kids. So you'd be right, but we're 20 years down the line.
Right.
Alvin, I want to ask you about what's going on in Illinois. Back in 2017, Governor Rauner, and then 2021, Governor Pritzker signed declarations inviting immigrants, documented and undocumented, to the state and said, we're going to treat you like we treat everybody else, including health care. But now, health care for undocumented immigrants runs about $404 million a year. And the state has budget problems. They're thinking about cutting out health care for the undocumented. How do you feel about that?
Well, it's kind of, when you look back at this past presidential election, one of the mistakes that the Democratic Party made was saying there was no immigration problem. Now, even if those that were running for office honestly believe that, there really isn't this problem that these Republicans are really, really beating us over the head with. You don't say that. You say, yes, I'm not going to round people up and send them to, El Salvador or whatever, but we have a problem and we're going to handle it. As Wendy predicted, most of us said, Governor Pritzker is running for president, and that's just a presidential declaration. Yeah, I don't care what I did 5 years ago. This is a problem now, so sorry, undocumented people.
That feels like such a bait and switch for somebody who made a life decision, like putting down roots in Illinois from another country. I think that's shameful.
Well, I'm not the governor.
I know. I'm saying I do not agree with your defense of Governor Pritzker here. I get what you're saying. You're living in the real world, but that just seems very distasteful to me.
It's also dangerous, because if someone is undocumented and needs health care, let's say it's for tuberculosis, do you want to treat that person or do you want to spread tuberculosis? And $404 million is good for the healthcare economy, for the hospitals and the providers.
This is a state famously that cannot fund its pensions. I mean, so if I'm a resident of Illinois, and you said once, and I always give you credit for these brilliant things, but you said once that certain people march and riot in the streets and certain people march and riot at the ballot box. And I do think that there are a lot of people who think, why are we funding the people of the world in the state of Illinois when we can't fund our pensions?
That's true.
Now, I agree that people feel that way, although I'm inclined to agree with Sarah that it's short-sighted to take a large population and say you get no health care.
After they were told.
Right.
Well, that, and the one thing is just what do people do that don't have any health care? We don't throw people out of the hospital. We don't turn them away from the emergency room if they're wounded or cut or anything like that. You pay for that. The United States of America pays for our shoddy health care system. We pay it. Illinois will pay in some fashion, probably more than $404 million.
Yeah,
when an undocumented lady goes and has a baby in a hospital, you ever see that bill?
It's more expensive when you make a person use the ER as their primary physician.
That's right.
It's a more expensive proposition.
Not
they
to mention,
are paying into
They
the
tell
system.
me, I don't
And they're
Yes, they
paying
are
it.
now.
They are
how
paying
many
into
of the
system.
workers this week removing tree limbs and taking down trees
That's
were
right.
from another country? You know, and we
Maybe
relied
this
on
is
them this week.
our population growth plan. We'll lure them here with how wonderful St. Louis is while they're here helping us.
Let's
how
go.
we're
Okay.
Gotta go. Let's go to the mailbag and see what viewers had to say about the last two programs. We heard from Victor Dawson of St. Louis, who wrote, "Watching Donnie Bash, I was really upset that Wendy commented that my president was so hated. I can't believe she's unaware of the election results. By the way, love the show, been a faithful viewer since the early days." We also heard from Rita LaMonica of Crestwood. Ed Martin got bounced from the D.C. prosecutor job to looking at the illegality of President Biden's pardons. Pretty remarkable considering Mr. Trump's pardons of the January 6th rioters. Anna Hook of Belnor added, "I would like to know who told you Incarnate Word Academy was closing for sure and moving to St. Charles. I'm a grandmother of a student presently at the school and the mother of 2 alums. I've been told that nothing has been decided." And finally, we heard from Carol Prombo of St. Louis. "Kudos to Alder Saunier for bringing up the issue of the disparity between the county and the city with respect to access special education. Missouri Senate Bills 202 and 203 address this. Lawmakers could have demonstrated their support for city school children by passing such legislation." You can write us, care of 9PBS 63108. Don't forget those emails, Donnybrook@9pbs.org. On social media, use hashtag DonnybrookSTL. Call the 9 line at your convenience. We want to hear from you at 314-512-9094. And do what I did. Listen to Donnybrook on your favorite podcast source. Make sure you tune in to the 9PBS YouTube channel because we have more to come, including people in the city jail and the county jail without fresh air or sunlight, sometimes for 4 years. Are their rights being constitutionally violated? We're going to get into that on Last Call. We hope you join us for that, and we hope you join us next week. Have a great time, whatever you decide to do.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.